I told you, no animals on this sidewalk. I don't care if it's a service dog.
HOA President Karen had made Sarah's life an absolute living hell for months. Daily harassment, endless fines, cruel insults about her wheelchair and disability. But when Karen crossed the final line and violently attacked Bailey, Sarah's beloved service dog, Sarah thought no one would ever help her. She felt completely alone. Then, a mysterious neighbor stepped forward, a retired Navy SEAL who had been quietly watching everything unfold. Karen had absolutely no idea what was coming for her. Before you watch this full story, please comment below and let me know which country you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more amazing true stories like this one. Merry Christmas to all of you wonderful viewers. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Maple Grove's pristine sidewalks as Sarah Martinez wheeled herself slowly toward her mailbox. Every single push of her wheelchair sent sharp, stabbing pain through her tired arms. But she had grown used to it over the 3 long years since a drunk driver had stolen her ability to walk and changed her life forever. What she hadn't grown used to, what she didn't think she would ever get used to, was the woman standing on the sidewalk ahead of her right now. Arms crossed tightly, face twisted into an ugly mask of pure disgust. Karen Pettin, HOA President, self-appointed guardian of property values and neighborhood standards. The woman who had made Sarah's life a nightmare for 6 solid months. "You're blocking the sidewalk again." Karen's voice cut through the quiet afternoon like a sharp knife. "This is the 3rd time just this week, Sarah." Sarah looked down at her wheelchair, then at the wide expanse of sidewalk that was more than big enough for everyone. "I'm just getting my mail, Mrs. Pettin," she said quietly. "I'll only be a moment too long." Karen stepped closer, her expensive designer heels clicking sharply against the concrete. "Do you have any idea how this looks? A wheelchair just parked on the sidewalk like that? What will potential buyers think when they drive through our neighborhood?" Sarah felt her chest tighten with familiar anxiety. This wasn't new. This had been her reality for 6 months now, ever since she'd moved into her late grandmother's beautiful house that had been left to her as a refuge, a safe place to rebuild her life. It had started with official citations for her accessibility ramp being aesthetically displeasing to the neighborhood character. Then came the endless complaints about Bailey, her service dog, a gentle golden retriever, who helped Sarah with daily tasks and gave her the independence to live on her own. "I have a right to live here," Sarah said quietly, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her mail. "Just like everyone else in this neighborhood, right?" Karen laughed, a cold, brittle sound that had no warmth in it whatsoever. "You have an obligation to maintain community standards. This neighborhood has a carefully cultivated reputation. We can't have... .. She gestured vaguely, dismissively at Sarah's wheelchair. ... This sort of thing dragging down everyone's property values." Bailey whimpered softly beside Sarah's wheelchair, sensing her owner's distress the way she'd been professionally trained to do. The beautiful dog pressed closer, offering comfort and support. Karen's eyes fixed on Bailey with unmistakable hatred. "And that animal," she said with disgust. "I've told you repeatedly dogs are not allowed in Maple Grove. Not pets, not strays, nothing." "She's a service dog," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "She's legally protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You can't." "I can do whatever I want," Karen interrupted sharply. "I'm the HOA president. I run this community." She pulled out her expensive smartphone. "I'm documenting this. Another violation for your file. Another fine. Maybe when the fines get high enough, you'll finally get the message and leave our neighborhood." Sarah had no idea that someone had been watching Karen's cruel behavior for weeks. A retired Navy SEAL who lived across the street had been documenting everything, and what Karen was about to do next would finally give him the evidence he needed to take her down. "Stay with me, this gets intense." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she absolutely refused to let them fall. Not in front of this woman. Not again. She'd cried too many times already. Why are you doing this to me? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I've done nothing to you. Nothing. You exist, Karen said, coldly. In my neighborhood. Bringing down the aesthetic with your medical equipment. Making people uncomfortable just by being here. That's quite enough. As Sarah wheeled away slowly, Bailey walking protectively beside her. She didn't see Karen's smile sharp and cruel as a blade cutting through flesh, but someone else did see it. Lieutenant Commander James Reeves had been watching everything for exactly 43 days now. He'd moved into the rental house across the street with no fanfare. No big introductions to the neighbors. No welcome party. That's exactly how he preferred it after 20 years as a Navy SEAL. After missions he could never speak about to anyone. And scars he never showed in public. James had learned the immense value of patient observation, of understanding a battlefield completely before ever engaging the enemy. And Maple Grove was absolutely a battlefield, even if most of the residents didn't know it yet. He'd first noticed Sarah on his third day living there. A young woman in a wheelchair, maybe 30 years old, with dark brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and eyes that carried the heavy weight of someone who'd already fought their own private wars. She moved with careful determination, never asking anyone for help, never complaining about her situation. And then there was Karen. James had encountered her type many times before in his military career. In tactical terms, she was a classic bully who operated within systems of power, finding ways to abuse authority without technically breaking laws. She'd found her little kingdom here in this HOA, and she ruled it with petty tyranny. He had been documenting everything he witnessed. The violation notices Karen posted on Sarah's front door. The deliberately loud inspections at 7 o'clock in the morning. The time Karen had accidentally left her trash cans blocking Sarah's accessibility ramp. But what James witnessed that particular afternoon crossed a line he couldn't ignore. From his front porch, he watched Karen follow Sarah back toward her house. Watched her deliberately step in front of the wheelchair, forcing Sarah to stop abruptly. Watched Bailey stand up, alert now, moving into a protective stance. Move, Sarah said, her voice tired and defeated. Please, just move. Make me, Karen replied with a cruel smirk. Oh wait, you can't, can you? How convenient for me. James stood up from his chair, his jaw tight with controlled anger. 20 years of intensive training kept him from reacting immediately. 20 years of hard-earned discipline kept him from crossing the street and doing something he'd regret. But when Karen raised her foot and deliberately kicked Bailey hard in the ribs, something inside James broke. The dog yelped a terrible sound of pain and confusion. Bailey stumbled backward, whimpering, and Sarah cried out in anguish, reaching desperately for her companion. You're going to pay for that, Karen said coldly, pulling out her phone again. That dangerous animal just attacked me. I have witnesses. She gestured broadly toward empty windows. That dog is vicious and dangerous. I'm calling animal control immediately. She didn't attack you. Sarah's voice cracked with anguish and rage. You kicked her. You deliberately hurt her. Prove it. Karen smirked with satisfaction. Go ahead and prove it. I can, James called out, his voice carrying across the street with the natural authority of someone used to being heard over gunfire and chaos. Both women turned sharply. Karen's face went pale, then flushed dark red with anger. Sarah's eyes widened with desperate hope. This was the moment everything changed. James had video evidence of Karen assaulting a federally protected service animal. And he wasn't just any witness, he was a decorated Navy SEAL who knew exactly how to take down an enemy. What he does next will shock you. James crossed the street with measured, deliberate steps, his smartphone already in his hand with the video recording clearly visible on the screen. I have the last 20 minutes recorded on camera, James said calmly, including you assaulting a service animal. That's a federal offense, Mrs. Patton, a serious one. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You ... you can't. Double quotes, I can. I did. And I will provide this evidence to the authorities, James said firmly. Then he looked at Sarah with genuine concern. Are you all right? Is your dog seriously injured? Sarah was crying now, her hands gently checking Bailey's ribs, while the dog shook with fear. She needs a vet. I need to get her help, but I can single quotes, Her voice broke completely. The stress, the fear, the months of relentless torment finally overwhelmed her, all at once. I'll drive you, James said gently. My truck has an accessibility ramp. We'll get Bailey checked out right away. You'll do no such thing, Karen snapped. This is HOA property. You're both trespassing. I'll have you both arrested immediately. James turned to her slowly, and for the first time, Karen saw something in his eyes that made her instinctively step backward. It wasn't anger she thought she could deal with. It was something colder, more dangerous. The look of a man who'd stared down far worse threats than a suburban tyrant and come out standing. Try it, he said quietly, calmly. Please, I'd actually welcome that. Karen's courage evaporated like water on hot pavement. She turned and walked away quickly, her heels clicking frantically against the concrete. But not before she spat out, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." James knelt beside Sarah's wheelchair. "My name's James," he said gently. "Let's take care of Bailey first. Then we'll take care of everything else. I promise." The veterinarian confirmed what they'd feared. Bailey had severely bruised ribs, but thankfully no permanent damage or broken bones. The gentle dog would recover fully with rest and pain medication. Sarah sat in the waiting room with her face buried in her hands, finally allowing herself to break down completely. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside her. Months of harassment, years of struggling with her disability, a lifetime of fighting just to be treated with basic human dignity. James sat quietly beside her, not offering empty platitudes or meaningless comfort. He knew from extensive experience that sometimes people just needed to let it all out. When her tears finally slowed, he handed her a bottle of cold water from the vending machine. "Thank you," she whispered hoarsely, "for helping, for seeing what was happening, for caring enough to do something." "I've been seeing it for quite a while," James admitted honestly. "I should have stepped in sooner. I'm genuinely sorry I didn't." Sarah shook her head firmly. "It's not your responsibility. I'm supposed to handle this myself. I'm supposed to be strong enough to fight my own battles." "Strength isn't carrying everything alone," James said quietly. "That's just stubbornness disguised as independence. I learned that lesson the hard way over many years." Over the next hour, as they waited for Bailey's pain medication to take effect, Sarah told him her complete story. The terrible accident had stolen her ability to walk, the long, painful rehabilitation, the death of her beloved grandmother, who'd left Sarah the house as a refuge, a place to heal and rebuild, and Karen's systematic campaign of harassment to drive her out. "She wants to buy my property," Sarah explained, her voice hollow. "It's prime real estate, corner lot, mature trees, excellent location. She's made offers through intermediaries and shell companies. When I refused to sell, that's when everything got so much worse." "How much worse?" James asked, though he suspected he already knew. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him a folder of meticulous documentation. Violation notices, dozens of them. Fines totaling over $30,000. Letters from the HOA, threatening immediate legal action. Photos of her property taken at odd hours, clearly meant to intimidate. And messages, cruel, vicious messages sent from anonymous accounts, but clearly from Karen, telling Sarah she didn't belong, that she was ruining the neighborhood, that everyone wished she would leave or die. James's hands clenched into fists as he read through everything. "You've gone to the police?" "3 times. Sarah's voice was completely hollow. "They say it's a civil matter. HOA disputes aren't their jurisdiction unless there's a direct physical threat. Today was the first time she physically hurt Bailey. Everything else has technically been within legal bounds. Barely, but still legal." "Not anymore," James said firmly. She assaulted a service animal. I have clear video evidence. And I know several lawyers who specialize in disability discrimination cases. He paused. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Sarah met his eyes. They were gray-blue, like storm clouds over a turbulent ocean. She saw something there that Karen clearly hadn't noticed. Not just raw strength, but genuine kindness. The kind of kindness that's earned through suffering, not given cheaply. Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. You don't even know me. James was about to reveal something personal that would explain everything, why he was so determined to help Sarah, and why he wasn't going to stop until Karen paid for what she'd done. His answer will break your heart. James was quiet for a long moment. I had a younger sister, he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. Amanda. She had cerebral palsy from birth, used a wheelchair her whole life. She dealt with people exactly like Karen, constantly. People who treated her like she was less than human, like her disability was somehow a personal inconvenience to them. He paused, clearly struggling. She died 4 years ago, not from her medical condition, but from giving up. The world just wore her down, bit by bit, until she didn't want to fight anymore. She couldn't take it. Fresh tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, James said, his voice thick with emotion. Just let me help you. Let me do for you what I couldn't do for Amanda. Let me make sure that Karen pays for what she's done to you. Sarah nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. James didn't waste a single minute. That same evening, he made 3 crucial phone calls. The first was to Marcus Chen, a former Navy SEAL who'd left the military and become a civil rights attorney, specializing in disability discrimination cases. The second call was to Detective Linda Morrison, a police officer who owed James her life from an incident several years ago that neither of them ever spoke about publicly. The third call was to his buddy Tyler, who specialized in a very particular kind of electronic surveillance and digital investigation. I need absolutely everything on Karen Petton, James told Tyler. Financials, communications, property records, legal documents, everything you can find. How deep do you want me to go? Tyler asked. Down to bedrock, James said. I want to know everything. Within 48 hours, James had a complete picture of Karen's operation, and it was so much worse than he'd ever imagined possible. Sarah wasn't Karen's first victim, not even close. Over the past 8 years, serving as HOA president, Karen had systematically targeted 11 different families. Every single one had either sold their homes at far below market value or been foreclosed, undue to crushing HOA fines they couldn't pay. Every single property had then been purchased by a shell company called Maple Holdings LLC. Karen's husband, Robert Petton, secretly owned Maple Holdings LLC. They'd been running an organized scheme forcing out residents through deliberate harassment and legal intimidation, buying the properties cheaply, then reselling them at massive profits. They'd made over $2 million, and Sarah's corner lot was their biggest target yet. Market value, $850,000. Karen had offered Sarah just $200,000, knowing the HOA fines and legal fees would eventually force her to sell at any price. This is organized fraud, Marcus said over a video call, carefully reviewing all the documents. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Disability discrimination under the ADA and Fair Housing Act. Conspiracy to deprive civil rights. James, this is absolutely massive. Can we prove it in court? James asked. With what you've gathered. Absolutely, Marcus said with a grim smile. But it'll take time. Legal cases move slowly through the system. Then we apply pressure, James said. Make them panic. Make them make mistakes. Marcus smiled grimly. I like how you think, but be very careful. People with this much money to lose can be extremely dangerous. James had faced dangerous before. It didn't scare him anymore. Karen was about to strike back hard. She had no idea James was setting a trap for her, But what she did next was so shocking, so criminal, that it would seal her fate forever. You won't believe what happens. Karen struck back, just 3 days later, but not in any way James had expected. He'd gone to the grocery store, a routine supply run that should have taken 40 minutes maximum. He'd been careful, checking his mirrors constantly, varying his routes, maintaining full situational awareness. Old habits from multiple combat deployments. But when he returned to Maple Grove, thick black smoke was billowing from Sarah's house. James's truck was still moving when he bailed out, sprinting at full speed toward the flames. He could see Sarah in her wheelchair on the front lawn, Bailey beside her, both of them staring at the burning kitchen window in complete shock. "Are you hurt?" James demanded, checking her over quickly. "Are you injured?" "No, I was in the living room watching TV. I heard glass break, then ... She gestured helplessly at the flames. "James, I didn't do anything. I swear I didn't leave the stove on. I didn't." "I know," James said firmly. He was already on the phone with 911, but his eyes were tracking the street carefully. There was a silver sedan pulling away 2 blocks down. The same vehicle he'd seen parked outside Karen's house yesterday. The fire department arrived within minutes. The damage was mostly contained to the kitchen. When the fire chief examined the scene, his conclusion was immediate and clear. "A Molotov cocktail was thrown through the window," he said. "This was deliberate arson, no question about it." The police took statements. Sarah was shaking badly, going into shock, and the paramedics insisted she needed to go to the hospital for evaluation. "I'll stay with Bailey," James said. "You get checked out." "No." Sarah's voice was suddenly stronger than he'd ever heard it. "No more running. I'm not leaving my home. I'm not letting her win. Not anymore." But Karen wasn't finished yet. Not even close. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Bailey gone. James heard her screams from across the street and ran to her house immediately. Sarah was in the backyard, crying hysterically, calling Bailey's name over and over. The gate was standing wide open, deliberately unlatched during the night. "She took her," Sarah sobbed. "She took my dog. James, Bailey is everything to me. She's not just a pet, she's how I function, how I live independently. Without her, I can single quotes." James pulled out his phone. Tyler answered on the first ring. "I need traffic camera footage. Maple Grove area between midnight and 6 a.m. Looking for a silver sedan, possibly with a dog inside." Then James called Detective Morrison. The situation just escalated to kidnapping. A service animal is legally considered medical equipment. Taking Bailey is legally equivalent to stealing Sarah's wheelchair. "I'm on my way right now," Morrison said immediately. Marcus delivered crucial information 2 hours later. "I filed an emergency restraining order against Karen. The judge granted it, based on all the evidence: the assault on Bailey, the arson investigation, and the clear harassment pattern. Karen is legally required to stay 500 feet away from Sarah and to return Bailey immediately." "She's not going to comply," James said. "I know," Marcus agreed. "That's exactly why I also filed a motion to have the HOA dissolved pending fraud investigation. It'll take effect in 72 hours. James smiled grimly. "She's going to lose absolutely everything." Karen was about to make one final, desperate move. She called an emergency HOA meeting to have Sarah evicted, but she had no idea that James had contacted every single one of her previous victims. The confrontation in that community center will give you chills. Karen's response was swift and vicious. She called an emergency HOA meeting that same evening, mandatory attendance for all residents, with fines for anyone who didn't show up. Sarah received the notice via email: urgent discussion of dangerous resident and property condemnation proceedings. "She's going to try to have me evicted," Sarah said, her voice completely numb. "She's going to vote to condemn my house because of the fire damage, force me out permanently, and I'll never find Bailey. Then we go to that meeting," James said firmly, "and we end this once and for all." The community center was absolutely packed. 60 residents, most of them looking genuinely uncomfortable. They knew something was very wrong, but years of Karen's authoritarian rule had taught them to stay silent, to avoid becoming targets themselves. Karen stood at the podium in her designer suit, looking perfectly composed. "Thank you all for coming. We have a serious situation that requires immediate action. Ms. Martinez's property has become a safety hazard to our entire community. The recent fire, the structural damage, the presence of an aggressive animal." "Bailey isn't aggressive," Sarah called out from her wheelchair near the back. "And you know that perfectly well." Karen's smile was poisonous. "The dog attacked me, unprovoked. I have injuries to prove it." "You have a video of you kicking her," James said, standing beside Sarah, "which has been provided to the police, the judge who issued your restraining order, and about 40 news outlets as of 3 hours ago." The room went completely silent. Karen's face drained of all color. James continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "You've systematically harassed Ms. Martinez for 6 months. You've assaulted her service animal. You're under investigation for arson, and as of this morning, you and your husband are being investigated for fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations involving 11 families over 8 years. Shocked murmurs spread through the crowd. Neighbors looked at each other as pieces finally clicked into place. "You're lying," Karen hissed. "You have no proof of any of this." "I have all the proof needed." Marcus stood up from the front row, his lawyer's briefcase in hand. "I'm Marcus Chen, representing Ms. Martinez. I also represent the Rodriguez family, the Tanners, and the Washingtons, 3 of your previous victims, who are now plaintiffs in a federal lawsuit against you. Your husband, and Maple Holdings, LLC. More people stood up throughout the room. James recognized them from his research families, who'd been forced out, who'd lost their homes to Karen's schemes. "We stayed silent before," Mr. Rodriguez said, his voice shaking with anger, "because we thought we were alone. Because you made us think we'd done something wrong. But we're not alone anymore. And you're the criminal here, Karen." "This is insane." Karen was breathing hard now, her composure cracking. "This meeting is over. Everyone, leave immediately." "Actually," Detective Morrison said, entering through the back door with 2 uniformed officers, "this meeting is just getting started. Mrs. Petton, you're under arrest for assault, animal cruelty, arson, and violation of a restraining order." They found Bailey in Karen's garage that night, locked in a crate, scared and dehydrated, but alive and unharmed. When the officers brought her out, Sarah's sob of relief was the most heartbreaking and joyful sound James had ever heard in his life. The dominoes fell quickly after that night. Karen and Robert Petton were both arrested. The fraud investigation uncovered even more crime stacks: evasion, money laundering, forged documents. Their assets were frozen. Their shell company was dissolved. The HOA was restructured with new, compassionate leadership. The first vote was unanimous: void all of Karen's violations and fines against Sarah, and issue a formal apology for the harassment she'd endured. Marcus's lawsuit moved forward, now representing 12 families. The Petons would face years in prison and millions in damages. But for Sarah, the greatest victory was simpler. She was home, safe, no longer afraid. 3 months later, James stood in Sarah's rebuilt kitchen, helping her hang new curtains. "You don't have to keep helping," Sarah said, handing him another curtain rod. "You've already done more than enough." "Maybe I like helping," James replied with a smile. "Or maybe I just like your company." Sarah smiled back, real, genuine smile. "Bailey likes you too. She doesn't warm up to just anyone." They worked in comfortable silence. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Can I ask you something personal? Anything? Why did you really move here? Maple Grove isn't exactly where retired SEALs usually settle down." James set down his tools. "Honestly, I didn't know where else to go. After 20 years in service, I came back to a world that felt alien, too quiet, too safe, too normal." He paused. Amanda used to tell me that real battles aren't fought with guns. They're fought in courtrooms and community meetings, and on sidewalks where people make choices about who deserves dignity. She was right, Sarah said softly. She was. And for a long time after she died, I was just angry. Angry at the world for breaking her. Angry at myself for not being there when she needed me. James met Sarah's eyes. But then I saw you, saw what you were going through, and I realized Amanda didn't want me to be angry. She wanted me to fight for people who couldn't fight alone. She'd be so proud of you, Sarah whispered. I hope so, James smiled, and I think she'd really like you. You've got her stubborn streak. Sarah laughed through her tears. Is that a compliment? The highest one I can give. The transformation of Maple Grove didn't happen overnight, but it happened gradually, beautifully. The community that had once been ruled by fear slowly came together in ways it never had before. Mr. Rodriguez started a community garden where everyone was invited to participate. The Tanners organized monthly potluck dinners. Accessibility improvements were made throughout the neighborhood, not just meeting legal requirements, but genuinely making everyone feel welcome and included. Sarah became something she never expected to be: an advocate and a voice for others. She started speaking at city council meetings about disability rights. She created a support group for people with disabilities that met weekly at the community center. She shared her story with local news outlets, raising awareness about HOA abuse and the importance of standing up to discrimination. And through every single moment of it, James was right there beside her, supporting her, believing in her. 3 months after the trial concluded, James stood in Sarah's completely rebuilt kitchen, helping her hang new curtains where the old ones had burned. The renovation had been covered by insurance and an overwhelming community fundraiser that raised triple what they actually needed. Neighbors who wanted to make amends for their silence had opened their hearts and their wallets. You know, you don't have to keep helping me like this, Sarah said, handing him another curtain rod. You've already done so much more than enough. Maybe I actually like helping, James replied with a warm smile. Or maybe I just really enjoy your company. Sarah smiled back, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her entire face. Well, Bailey certainly likes you, and she doesn't warm up to just anyone, you know. As if on cue, Bailey trotted over and sat down between them, her tail wagging happily. James scratched behind her ears, and the dog leaned into his touch with complete trust. They worked together in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Sarah gathered her courage and spoke. Can I ask you something personal? Anything you want, James said. Why did you really move here? To Maple Grove, I mean. This isn't exactly the kind of place where retired Navy SEALs usually settle down after their service. James set down his tools and leaned against the counter, considering his answer carefully. Honestly, I didn't know where else to go. After 20 years in military service, after all those missions and deployments, I came back to a world that felt completely alien to me. Too quiet, too safe, too normal. I didn't know how to fit into it anymore. He paused, his eyes distant. Amanda, my sister, she used to tell me something important. She'd say that the real battles worth fighting aren't the ones fought with guns and tactics. They're fought in courtrooms and community meetings and on ordinary sidewalks. In moments where people make choices about who deserves basic human dignity and respect. She was absolutely right, Sarah said softly, her eyes glistening. She was, James agreed. And for a long time after she died, I was just angry. So angry at the world for breaking her spirit. Angry at myself for not being there when she needed me most, for not protecting her better. He met Sarah's eyes. But then I moved here, and I saw you, saw what you were going through with Karen, and I suddenly realized something. Amanda didn't want me to waste my life being angry. She wanted me to use everything I'd learned, all that training and discipline, to fight for people who couldn't fight alone. To stand up when others wouldn't. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. She would be so incredibly proud of you. I know she would be. I really hope so, James said, his own voice thick with emotion. And I think she would have absolutely loved you. You've got her same stubborn streak, that refusal to give up no matter what. Sarah laughed through her tears. Is that supposed to be a compliment? It's the highest compliment I can give. One evening, about a year later, Sarah and James sat together on her front porch, watching the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Bailey dozed contentedly between them, her head resting on Sarah's lap. The evening air was perfect, not too hot, not too cold. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, reaching over to take James's hand in hers. For everything. For seeing me, really seeing me. Not my wheelchair, not my disability, not my limitations. Just me. James squeezed her hand gently. You're incredibly easy to see, Sarah. You shine brighter than anyone I've ever known. I love you, Sarah said suddenly, the words coming easily because they were completely true. James turned to her, his gray-blue eyes soft and warm. I love you too. I have for quite a while now. Good, Sarah smiled. Because you're stuck with me now. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, James said, and he leaned over and kissed her as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and amber. Bailey's tail thumped happily against the porch floor, as if she approved completely. 2 years after Karen's conviction, Sarah and James stood together in a small downtown office, signing the final paperwork to officially establish the Amanda Reeves Foundation for Disability Rights and Advocacy. The foundation, funded partially by Sarah's substantial legal settlement and partially by donations from supporters across the country who had followed her story, would provide free legal assistance to people facing discrimination. It would train lawyers specifically on disability law. It would create comprehensive resources for people trapped in abusive HOA situations. Amanda would absolutely love this, James said, his voice thick with emotion, as he looked at his sister's name printed on the official letterhead. She always wanted to help people who were going through what she experienced. She wanted to make things better. Now she will, Sarah said, squeezing his hand. Through us, through everyone we help, her legacy lives on. She's still fighting, still making a difference. The first case they took on was a military veteran with PTSD, being harassed by his HOA for having an emotional support animal. The second case involved a family with an autistic child being cited for excessive noise when the child had meltdowns. The third was an elderly man being systematically forced out of his home because his medical equipment was deemed unsightly by his HOA board. Each case they won, each person they helped, felt like honoring Amanda's memory in the most meaningful way possible, like proving that the cruelties Sarah had faced wouldn't just break. Hurt had transformed her into someone who could protect others from the same fate. 6 months after opening the foundation, Sarah received an unexpected letter. It was from a woman named Jennifer in another state who had seen Sarah's story featured on the national news. Jennifer was in a wheelchair, facing terrible harassment from her HOA, being told constantly that she was bringing down property values. She was losing hope, ready to give up. Sarah called her immediately. I know exactly what you're going through, Sarah said gently. And I'm here to tell you something important. You're not alone. You don't have to fight this battle by yourself anymore. I'm just so tired, Jennifer whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so tired of being treated like I'm less than human, like my very existence is somehow an inconvenience to everyone around me. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering that exact feeling, the exhaustion, the despair, that terrible moment when giving up seemed so much easier than continuing to fight. I know, Sarah said with deep understanding. I've been exactly where you are right now. But Jennifer, listen to me carefully. You are not an inconvenience. You are no less than anyone else. You are a human being who deserves dignity and respect, and a safe home where you can live in peace. And I'm going to help you get that. We're going to fight this together. Over the next 3 months, the foundation worked on Jennifer's case, with dedication and skill. They documented every instance of harassment. They filed formal complaints. They brought in expert witnesses. They challenged every single violation and fine. They exposed every discriminatory practice. And they won. Jennifer kept her home. The abusive HOA president was removed from power. New protective policies were implemented. Justice was served. When it was finally over, Jennifer traveled across the country to meet Sarah in person at the foundation office. The two women embraced, both crying, both understanding, on a profound level, what the other had endured and survived. "You saved my life," Jennifer said through her tears. "I was completely ready to give up on everything. But you showed me that fighting back is possible, that justice is possible, that I matter." "You saved yourself," Sarah replied, holding her tight. "You found the courage to reach out, to ask for help, to keep going. That takes incredible strength." And in that moment, Sarah understood something profound. Her suffering hadn't been meaningless. The nightmare she'd endured with Karen, all that pain and fear and struggle, had given her the knowledge and strength to guide others through their own darkness. She had survived her hell, and now she was helping others survive theirs. That evening, Sarah and James stood together in front of their house now. Since James had officially moved in, watching the neighborhood's annual accessibility awareness celebration, children played freely in the streets. Families mingled and laughed together. The community that Karen had tried to control through fear and intimidation had blossomed into something genuine and beautiful. A place where people actually cared for each other. "I never thought I'd say this," Sarah said, leaning against James's shoulder, "but I'm grateful for what happened. Not for Karen's cruelty, but for what came after it. For finding my strength. For finding real community. For finding purpose." She looked up at him with love. "For finding you." James wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "You would have found all of that anyway. You're too strong not to." Sarah smiled. "Maybe, but it happened the way it happened, and I'm here now. Happy, home, safe, making a real difference in people's lives. Amanda would be so proud," James said softly, "of both of us." "Tell me about her again," Sarah said. "I love hearing your stories about her." So James did. They sat together on their porch as twilight fell, Bailey sleeping peacefully at their feet. And he shared precious memories of his sister, her laugh, her courage, her unshakable belief that the world could be better if people chose kindness over cruelty. Sarah listened, holding his hand, understanding that this was a gift. That James shared his pain and his memories was how he honored his sister's legacy and kept her spirit alive. Somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Amanda smiled. And in Maple Grove, on a street that had once been ruled by fear and hatred and casual cruelty, love and justice and human decency had finally, truly come home. The scars remained, they always would. The trauma of those terrible months wouldn't simply vanish. But Sarah was no longer defined by what had been done to her. She was defined by how she'd survived it, how she'd refused to let cruelty win, how she'd found the strength to stand up and speak out and fight back. And that, she realized with perfect clarity, was the truest victory of all.